Hello, welcome back. So here's part two of the video explaining the language and structure techniques used in Emma Levine's extract from A Game of Polo with a headless goat. So we're up to the point in the race where the two donkeys and the entourage, the crowd of spectators in vehicles following behind have just arrived. We had all that anticipation of that moment, and then we've just had this detailed paragraph full of activity and descriptive details which tells us just how loud and full of energy this race is. And that continues with this next paragraph here where we're given lots more descriptive details. So something Levine does throughout is she doesn't just give visual details like a cloud of fumes, but she gives lots of details to do with the sound as well. And this just makes it as vivid for the reader as possible, and it makes it a bit more immersive for us. It makes it feel like we're there, and she immerses us in the middle of this race and makes it really vivid for us, so we don't just see it and picture it, but we almost are able to hear it as well. So we have the sense of the vehicles getting louder and louder, so we're waiting for that moment for when we join the race ourselves. So once again, a little bit more anticipation growing. What we have here is we have the semicolon followed by a tricolon of descriptions to do with the sound. So we have horns tooting, bells ringing, and the special rattles used just for this purpose. So we have the tricolon, so that's used to give us 3 different sounds. And what that does is it creates this sense that there is a cacophony of sounds. So if there's a cacophony of sounds, that means that it's very loud. There's lots of different noises contributing to this massive sound. And that's what's going on here. By individualizing the different sounds, she makes us understand just how loud this is, and by splitting them up, rather than just having noise and having 3 separate sounds, it makes us imagine and hear all the different sounds and activity that's happening here. And straight after that descriptive language about the sound, the next part is in brackets. So we have, so again, back to structure now. So we have brackets, or sometimes we can call them parentheses. And parentheses just means you add something extra. You add an extra detail. And what she does is she explains what the special rattles are. And she uses the comparison, they're like maracas. So she gives us a reference we would understand to help us work out what she means by these rattles. And the reference helps us picture and understand this culture a little bit more. And then we have all these different verbs here: men standing on top of their cars and vans, hanging out of taxis, perched on lorries, all cheered and shouted. So we've got lots of cars and vans and taxis. It's not very clear whether these are I'm pretty sure she's talking about moving vehicles rather than any other ones that are along the side of the road. So that just makes it sound the race is even more dangerous because of what the spectators are doing. They're hanging out of taxis, so it's very makeshift. This isn't a professional race with lots of seating and stands around the sides of the track like you would get at a professional race. This is very makeshift. It's very amateur, and as a result of that, it's very dangerous. They all cheered and shouted, so once again we've got even more noises thrown into the cacophony, thrown into the mix, while the vehicles jostled. And jostled's an interesting word because it makes this sound very competitive, very dangerous, once again, as if all these different vehicles are fighting against one another in order to get the best view. Jakob chose exactly the right moment to edge out of the road. So once again, edge is similar to inch earlier, how careful he's being. And then we've got the words swerve here, which obviously indicates a very sharp movement and tells us just how quickly he's had to react and break out onto the road. So swerve tells us just how dramatic and sharp a movement he's had to make there. Now we have some more comparisons that would work for us as a Western audience. Remember, part of her intention as a writer of a travelogue is to inform and explain, and that's what she's doing here. So the comparison to what we would understand, this was Formula One without rules, a city centre rush hour gone anarchic. So two things we're familiar with, and both examples have the idea of it being lawless and chaotic, and very busy, lots of frantic movements, for example. So that's what she's trying to do there. She uses two comparisons. So these two things, Formula One and a city centre rush hour, they have rules. But imagine if you took those rules away. That's the kind of race we're experiencing here. You may have heard of this word flouting. People flouting lockdown rules over the past few months, basically breaking the rule, every type of traffic rule and common sense. So they're not just breaking some traffic rules, but the use of every, once again, reinforces the total chaos of this scene. And it's not just people speeding, but it's people speeding, changing lanes, not indicating, and not obeying any traffic lights or road signs, whatever there may be. But this is where we get the point about, it's not just about sports, but it's about the people. This driver relishes, he's enjoying this test of driving skills in this environment. The comparison to this being a survival of the fittest, once again, reinforces the competitive nature and how people are fighting against each other in order to get the best view. And then we have two verbs here, so cut and, the adjective sharp tells us how, both of those words are quite severe and harsh, and they tell us just how, powerfully these people are moving and how quickly things are happening. They're not turning in front of people, and they're not softly doing it. They're doing it really with great intent and with great kind of power behind their movements. And again, more parenthesis, more brackets here, which again, a comparison to what we do in this country. We have lane discipline. You stay in your lane, or you indicate when you're changing lanes as you're moving around traffic. There's no discipline here. And the word discipline suggests something that is ordered, and if you're disciplined, you follow the rules. That just reinforces further how there are no rules here. And what she does, she has sentences like there were two races, which again make it clear to the reader and helps us follow it along. And then she includes sentences like this, which begin with prepositions, ahead of the donkeys. And that prepositional phrase, again, just helps us picture where everything is happening in our mind. So it's not happening behind, above, around, but ahead, the preposition, which again, just informs us where things are happening. And she gives us details of the location here with this parenthetical clause here. That's parentheses, but just without the brackets. And then we have more sharp and quick movements. People had to dive out of the way. They didn't just jump or move, they dived, which suggests the power and panic that was going behind that movement. And again, he relished the opportunity. He loved what was going on. So again, we're having an insight into their culture and what might terrify us. They are absolutely loving. Don't worry about the ellipsis here. That just indicates that some of the text has been missed out. And we jump forwards until the end of the race. The leading donkey swerved, lost his footing, and he and the cart tumbled over. The race was over. So once again, a car doesn't really swerve if it's going 5 miles an hour. So swerved tells us the immense pace at which this donkey was running. And then we have this very short sentence here. We're used to much longer sentences, as you can see. This sentence has lots of action in it, and lots of different verbs. So we've got reaching, we've got there was a pile up, swerved, lost his footing, tumbled over, and we have that very long sentence contrasted against this very short sentence. And short sentences, to me, they slow the pace down, and the halting of the pace reflects how the race has been halted too. So the race suddenly stops, therefore the pace of the writing suddenly slows down, and the paragraph ends as well, which reflects how the race has suddenly stopped and halted, especially after such a long sentence, which was demonstrating all the quick different movements that were going on. And then we have this change of paragraph, and this is a structure point, and this illustrates the change of tone. So we've had lots of activity, we've had a little bit of humour, with how the race has been described, like wacky races. Now we have it becomes more serious in tone. So you can comment on how Levine uses her paragraph structures to change the tone of her writing. So we've got the trouble began. The word trouble obviously suggests that something more serious is about to occur. We've got these inverted commas, so this suggests that the use of the word officials is ironic. This is a very amateur race. The word officials makes them look the opposite, makes them feel unofficial, makes them seem like they are amateurs, and this race wasn't actually properly marshalled. We have a little bit of understatement here, strong opinions. If they all staked money on the race, that's the least they would have, strong opinions, and then we have this tricolon of voices were raised, fists are out, and tempers rising. So a tricolon there. And once again, she's just using descriptive details through her language. And there's a mixture of noise and visual elements. So the fists tell us that people are ready to fight. Voices were raised. That helps us almost hear the noise of the crowd arguing, for example, and shouting. And voices were raised. I can infer from that, if voices were raised, people are angry and they're trying to make their point very strongly. Volatile here reinforces the word trouble, but volatile suggests that the moment is very explosive and it could erupt into violence at any moment. Jacob and Iqbal, they go and see what's happening. They're swallowed up by the crowd. So that makes the crowd seem even more powerful, because the writer personifies the crowd and it swallows them up. And so swallowed up suggests to me that they've completely disappeared, and that suggests how busy, frantic this situation is. They emerged. If someone emerges, then that means they were completely hidden and out of sight. The writer, I'm not sure whether I've mentioned this earlier, she includes dialogue throughout the story to make it more immersive for us. It makes us feel like we are her and they are speaking to us almost. So once again, that's more immersive. So we drive away. I really enjoyed that, he said, but I don't even have my license yet because I'm underage. And this is almost the climax of the article. The writer leaves this to the end for comic effect. That wouldn't have been as funny if we knew it at the start. She leaves it towards the end, and that detail, even though it was such a dangerous situation, the fact he jokes that he didn't even have his license yet, adds a bit of humour, which at the end of what was seemingly a very dramatic and tense situation. So she leaves it to the end, so that restores the humorous tone, because it was very serious, and now that detail brings the humorous tone back for the end of that paragraph, and it makes that whole piece of writing fit together. They both found this hilarious. So again, this is a different culture We would probably find that criminal behaviour, driving very quickly without a licence, for example, is a serious breaking of the law and could cause death. But in this culture we're being shown, they both found this hilarious. So once again, we're getting an insight into cultural differences, not just sporting differences. And the writing ends with this, what we call an understatement. So that's when you don't describe things to their true extent, but you under-describe them, or you don't paint them as serious as they were. So an example would be, well, there was great unrest during World War II. Well, that's an understatement. There was more than a little bit of great unrest. The race could have caused problems. Problems is an understatement. Well, how about a pile-up, death of animals and people, carnage, chaos, destruction, amputation of limbs, maybe. The race could have caused problems. That's a bit of an understatement. But again, by doing that, she's almost hiding the risks and the seriousness of the situation. She's, to make her piece of writing work and to make it humorous, that use of understatement, rather than saying all those horrible things that could have happened, the use of understatement instead makes the ending of the piece comic, which then fits in with what we had at the start, the wacky races. So that last bit, we have a bit of coherence there in tone. It starts and ends in both quite a comic way. Okay, so there's quite a short example, but as you can see, there's quite a lot to say about it in terms of the language and the structure. We had a couple of sentence structure points, but the main structure is all about the extra clauses she uses that make the reader able to follow what's happening. It's the chronological order, and it's how she changes her tone at the same time. That's enough structure points to get you through this answer. We know what purpose she has. At some point she wants to make the race seem exciting, she wants to make it interesting, she wants to make it entertaining, she wants to get across how serious it is, she wants to describe it. So what we've got there is a lot of example paragraph starters to use for a piece of writing, and then we've got some comparisons, we've got lots of sound description, we've got a few examples of personification, and we've got a few examples of humour as well, and some powerful verbs for language. So you should have a good set of annotations for this text, and that means we're ready to have a go at writing about